with a ballpoint pen that hardly worked. I, Sadie Evans, signed away 15 years of my life today at the courthouse in September. Randy was sitting across from me in his fancy suit, looking at his phone. Immobile felt like a fucking sauna. While his lawyer discussed asset division, my lawyer went through paperwork every 30 seconds as if we were dividing a sandwich. The escape room company is still all yours, right? Mr. Taylor waived all claims as the lawyer droned. Of course he did, Randy always. Thought my puzzle games were silly and infantile. But it turns out that our marriage was 3 weeks ago. I found out about his affair. He neglected to disclose pricey dinners, diamond purchases, and 5-star hotels on a credit card statement. I never got it. Her name was Jennifer, and she was employed at his legal practice. Typical Mrs. Evans, your signature is here. Signed without reading the tiny print because I didn't want his money and instead wanted to get out. An hour later, the fragrance of aged wood filled the air as I stood in my new apartment above Puzzle Paradise, my escape room business downtown, having the potential for 2 rooms that were little furnished but were mine. But I stopped acting as though Rise Corporation, dinner parties, or his mother's passive-aggressive remarks on my non-traditional line of work. The company was operating 3 escape rooms in a city that hardly grasped the idea. On most days, I received maybe 2 teenage reservations, tired couples searching for something new to do on the weekends or on dates. However, recently I had a frequent customer. She always arrived by myself, always reserved the hardest room on Wednesdays, and had tall, blonde hair that caught the light, perfectly balanced, with these intense blue eyes that appeared to see through every puzzle before. I even gave the rules an explanation, never received her name, she paid cash, resolved the issue quickly, and departed with only a courteous nod, no light talk, no grievances, and no recommendations, as additional clients consistently occupied the same room the following week. For some, she would ask in a voice that sounded like honey over whiskey. I began creating new tasks specifically for her, including difficult puzzles and secret locks. She solved every compartment that needed genuine ingenuity to find, and each time she did, I caught. Despite how chaotic my personal life had gotten, I was grinning as I looked at the clock above my computer and experienced that recognizable buzz of excitement that she would arrive shortly. The doorbell rang at precisely 3 o'clock, and she was wearing a basic black sweater, dark pants that fit her wonderfully, and those eyes that made me forget everything. As I was considering the standard question, she said, stepping closer, I wanted to know whether you had anything new at the counter where I put my booking calendar. Test me a little more. I saw that she was not wearing a wedding ring when her fingers drummed against the board. I may have heard myself utter something I've been working on, but it's not official. Neither was I anymore. She said, my name is Genevieve. As I guided her past the open yet flawless Genevieve Morgan, Sadie Evans, the main rooms leading to my craft area, was opened. Don't judge the mess back here in the prototype room. The doors marked staff only, was small, full of disorganized designs and partially constructed systems. I had spent months developing this idea. A detective's deserted office with a psychological thriller atmosphere captivated Genevieve, who whispered as she ran. The attention to detail is astounding as she runs her finger down an old typewriter that I had fitted with secret chambers, walked around the room as if she belonged there, looking at every component with expert interest. Genevieve loved every hint as customers hurried through the puzzles, anxious to get out and go on. You're not just a casual. As I watched her try a fake bottom in an old filing cabinet, I said, are you a player? I write mystery novels. Freelance. She smiled slightly as she looked up from the cabinet, saying, mostly short tales for magazines, nothing. You would realize that mystery authors must be able to solve puzzles, just like your rooms, are the best studies I've come across. While other escape games use simple fixes or cheap tactics, yours calls for real. The compliment struck me more strongly than it should have. According to deductive reasoning, Randy never recognized the creativity involved in making flawless puzzles, nor did they comprehend my job. Genevieve kept experimenting, and I ended up researching her even though it was simply another unsuccessful commercial endeavor. Deliberate yet intuitive movements, pausing to think, then testing solutions that seemed to appear out of nowhere. In just 20 minutes, she had unlocked 3 different systems that I had assumed would be difficult for her to understand. This combination lock is an hour, she continued, pointing to a safe concealed behind the numbers on the fake bookshelf match the case files listed in the typewriter. Hints you found so quickly. Born on April 7, 1939. Detective Morrison, badge number 4739. Spun the dial with assured accuracy. But the true inquiry is if his absence has anything to do with the murder case, or the lock opened to reveal a letter I had scribbled in the missing evidence. as the missing detective. She read it quietly, her lips moving slightly as she brilliantly absorbed the possibilities. She muttered that the detective fabricated his own death rather than going missing. She untangled the entire blackmail plot in less than an hour, when I had spent weeks creating it. Most people never. How long have you been designing these? I even discovered the safe. She turned to me in the small gap between us and asked, for 5 years, 2 prop desks were serious interest. What changed was the word divorce. Sorry, that's definitely more knowledge than you have. Spilled out before I could stop it. Needed anything new this morning? And Genevieve's face softened. That explains why you've been working down here till midnight every day. And why the locks on your apartment door above have been changed. This week, you've seen that I occasionally park across the street after sessions to solve the riddles. She paused as I was writing notes, but it's okay. It gives me a cause. I didn't mean to spy. To be precise, these are interactive storytelling and art installations, rather than merely escape rooms. Had ever characterized my work in such a manner that Randy referred to them as elaborate time wasters. I've been considering Genevieve's further discussion of narrative structure and puzzles for those who have nothing better to do. How can you design to elicit an emotional response from your clients that goes beyond merely resolving problems? The room, but the narrative follows them home and leaves them wondering. Regarding Detective Morrison's next move, she was correct. I'd always concentrated on the mechanical riddles, but Genevieve saw the deeper level I had been inadvertently establishing. Would you be open to working together? I could help develop stronger narrative frameworks and characters. She inquired abruptly. Storyline devices that improve the puzzle experience, like as backstories. Really? Your technical abilities combined with my storytelling experience, we could produce something wholly original. As I stood there in my messy workshop, I listened to the stunning woman verbally narrate my dreams. I had never experienced a change in my chest that had nothing to do with stories, riddles, or 2 weeks later, Genevieve had a risky business partnership. Essentially moved into my studio, showing up every night at 6 with coffee and densely packed legal pads. We worked on the handwriting until the streetlights came on. And occasionally afterwards, the Victorian house chamber needed more psychological horror, she murmured, lying on the ground with props all about her. What if the family didn't simply vanish? What if they're still there, imprisoned in the walls, in secret spaces beyond the audio recordings and portraits, prompted by particular puzzle answers? A child's laughing, footsteps, and murmurs. I drew her ideas from the nursery room in the margins of my drawings. Each one was brilliant, and revenue had increased since news of our partnership spread, even though I hadn't disclosed Genevieve's role to clients. You're wasted on magazine pieces, I told her during a break, as she enjoyed working behind the scenes. These ideals might one day be entire novels. She sat up and brushed the dust from her jeans, saying, "This is quicker and more fulfilling." Collaborating with her was organic in ways that my marriage had never been. And I operated as business partners, even scheduling intimacy in bed and having predictable, different interests. I questioned, what about the detective room? Genevieve's thoughts were like electricity flowing between us, and the conclusion seemed feeble. When Morrison's companion shows up at the crime scene, the player must decide whether to assist in concealing the staged death or reveal the truth. 2 entirely different moral escape routes, and various endings, complexity. She approached to look at my drawings, and I smelled something fresh and cozy, like cedar, and Vanilla's hair brushed against my neck as she bent over my shoulder to point out a detail, saying, "This mechanism here," she stated, "what if activation requires 2 people working simultaneously? Partners in crime, literally." Her tone was so quiet that it was practically a whisper. I turned to answer, and her face was just inches away from mine. Her blue eyes were silver-flecked for a heartbeat. Neither of us moved, and the workshop felt suddenly smaller and more electric. It was a nice idea, but I couldn't think of anything I could do with a business partner I'd known for 2 weeks. Cooperative aspects that enhance involvement at the precise moment, such as walking back toward the file cabinet, passed, but I was still conscious of the fact that each time she gave me tools, our fingers touched when we both reached for the... I persuaded myself that the contact felt purposefully electric in the same reference book. After 15 years of being emotionally confused after my divorce from Randy, I was desperate for intellectual interaction. And Genevieve, around 10:00, she added. As long as that is plentiful, there's nothing else I should do. Naturally, I'm grateful for tonight, and will be collecting her notebooks early tomorrow morning. I appreciate you letting me play in your sandbox. But she hesitated at the entrance, even though the divorce was challenging. You're creating something very remarkable here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Work. Randy used to call me a fool for playing complex games rather than managing a company. Was so certain that, in spite of myself, I chuckled. You've never even met him, and I don't need a man who would leave me. The subtext of the compliment that hung between us was that you obviously lack fundamental intelligence. I observed her, and none of us was prepared to say goodnight to Genevieve. Walked to her car, observing her poised shoulders and elegant movements, and when she drove off, I lingered in the doorway longer than necessary, wondering what in the world was going on with me that night. Silver-flecked blue eyes, the way she said my name, the way her lips curled and her hands motioned as she spoke. Into giggles at my most foolish jokes. I was growing fond of my female business partner, and the insight should have frightened me. Rather, it was like solving the trickiest puzzle I'd ever encountered. Found pieces fitting together, even though I was positive the image couldn't be created. We need to test it. Before our official debut, I gave Genevieve a customer perspective of the Morrison room from the inside on Thursday night. It's smart of you to play detective, and you may be the backup investigator that I locked. To solve Detective Morrison's absence, we entered the renovated room and set the timer for 45 minutes. The ambiance was ideal for dark illumination, as if paying customers would experience it. We effectively navigate through the first set of clues with the help of period items and her skillfully composed audio cues that create tension. After weeks of cooperation, our alliance is smooth. However, the evidence locker requires both your and my keys at the same time. Examining the dual lock system that we had installed, Genevieve stated exactly what. As you advised, we set up our positions on either side of the cabinet keys so that they would be ready on 3, 1, 2. There was total darkness after the lights went out, not even emergency lighting, which meant since the automatic door locks were electronic and the main breaker had tripped rather than having blown a fuse, we were stranded until the power came back on. Genevieve's voice came from somewhere to my left, and it wasn't in the script. I apologize. The old building was awful. When it's not raining, wiring might occur during storms. I struggled for my phone's flashlight, but the LED hardly made it through the darkness. We were encircled by artificial walls and props. Without adequate lighting, navigating is dangerous. Her hand found mine her fingers were steady and warm, so it would be safer in the dark if we stayed together. I should have drew away and kept a professional distance. But I persisted in saying, "Tell me, what went wrong?" "Why mention that now?" she whispered softly. "About Randy. We're stuck in a detective fiction sounds suitable for questioning." I chuckled. But he wanted, in a typical suburban home with a picket fence, I intended to construct escape rooms and dinner parties for business wives, solve problems, unworkable dreams, and the affairs in plural. Eventually, we found ourselves seated on the floor with her shoulder pressed against what appeared to be a fake fireplace. For me, the darkness made it simpler to have a more honest talk. How about, have you ever been married or engaged to a woman named Claire? She had previously discussed dating women, but I hadn't fully comprehended what that meant, so it hit me like cold water. Occurred, and she requested that I write romance novels rather than crime or mystery books. Apparently, I needed to embrace my feminine nature by writing about things that were too dark and male for fiction, relationships rather than killings. In fact, she had our entire future planned, including our wedding. When home kids started writing me sweet tales about falling in love, I came to the realization that I was simply another problem she needed to solve. I didn't miss the irony. "So you ran?" And I opted for sincerity above compromise. Her thumb made a very natural motion across my knuckles as you were doing it. "Sadi." Her voice was closer now, and even though I appeared unconscious, the touch shot warmth up my arm and settled someplace in my chest. Just a whisper. "May I ask you a private question? Please look at me. What do you think?" The question was a risky one for two ladies by themselves in the dark, and I should have avoided it. A joke shifted the topic, and I added, "I see someone who understands my work better than anyone has ever had. Intelligent, humorous, and quite unlike anyone I've ever met. And also, I saw someone who challenges my assumptions about myself." And the quiet that hung between us was heavy with, perhaps her hand was still in mine, and I could feel her breathing softly and closely. "Sadie!" I can smell her perfume and feel the warmth emanating from her body. "I'm about to kiss you, but if that's not what you want, you should definitely say something smart." Head yelled warnings, business partnerships, recent divorce, sexual identity crisis, rebound relationships. However, under the shadows of the enigma we had crafted together, reason felt pointless. "Okay," I murmured. Her lips unexpectedly touched mine, tasting warm and tender, like the coffee we had previously had. There was nothing like kissing Randy. No scratchy beard, no forceful pressure. Mild questions that gave me room to react or back off. But But I didn't back off when the power eventually went out. Fluorescent lights flooded the room, ruining the cozy darkness we had been enjoying. The magic was broken by stark reality, and they blinked at each other. Genevieve pointed out that it wasn't in the script to move away, so it's absolutely not usual. Testing process. But neither of us turned away or apologized. We didn't discuss the kiss for 3 days, because we both understood that whatever had just transpired between us wasn't going to end here. Not directly, but Genevieve continued to bring coffee every evening when she visited, and creative concepts, but the atmosphere in the workshop had changed, and every glance we exchanged had weight, and the contact lasted longer. We were like two magnets orbiting one another out of fear of getting too close. I plunged myself into installing new devices and trying puzzle sequences because it was close, but impossible to disassemble. Anything to keep from dissecting how I felt in the darkness. My cat, Sherlock, had escaped and gone missing for 2 days, through a window I had left open during the heat wave on Tuesday, and I hadn't seen him since the fucking cat was almost feral nevertheless. Rye's suggestion of a middle ground when I desired a dog. But now, I printed missing cat ads at the copy shop downtown. Great tabby green collar on Friday morning. Because I felt responsible, I gave Sherlock my phone number and a small reward offer, even though he typically ignored me. Couldn't afford the Royal Street Vintage Store, which seemed like an excellent location to post in a town with lots of foot traffic. I had only been inside once before, but I was pulled to the bulletin board by the entryway. When I inquired about the flyer, the owner of the collection of vintage board games and mystery books nodded in agreement. Lost pets typically turn up within a few blocks, so I hope you find him. Thank you, Sherlock, like the detective. A familiar voice said as I was tacking the message to the packed board. I turned to find Genevieve, looking interestedly at my flyer, decided to wear a sundress today rather than her typical pair of jeans and yellow cloth. In comparison, her hair appeared nearly black. "What are you doing here?" I inquired. "Same as you." She pointed to a pile of records close to the counter and said, "Look for, did you uncover the treasure? Perhaps it depends on what you think of jazz from the 1950s. Treasure." She showed me a milk crate that contained vinyl records, the majority of which were astonishingly well preserved, paused on a blue label that instantly reminded me of Miles Davis's Blue. I know that the original Columbia pressing is worth a fortune. We both went for the album after searching for this precise pressing for 2 years. "You're into jazz?" I questioned, as her palm covered mine on the CD spine at the same time, and neither of us attempted to release it. Before I could walk properly, I became enamored with bebop and cool jazz thanks to my dad, who played trumpet in college, too well on the saxophone. Yet at the same time, the coincidence seemed inconceivable. Reaching for the same rare album in a dusty record store, they shared musical experiences Randy had never comprehended. "You should take it," Genevieve whispered, keeping her hand motionless. I had the reissue already. "Are you joking that the original pressings are unicorns?" "Technically, you found it first, but we both did, and the store owner observed us from behind." Most likely, the counter was perplexed as to why two mature women couldn't figure out how to share a record that other customers were looking at, surrounding us, but I hardly noticed that they shared custody, so I recommended that we both purchase it, take turns keeping it. Which is absurd. She is leaving in a somewhat dejected manner. You know how wonderful shared custody of a jazz musician is. The sound was loud and authentic when you smiled. Album, but we went to the counter together, and I got the first listening rights contract. Genevieve was taking care of the money while I gave the Buste owner an explanation of our custody arrangement. We split $25 in 2 ways for an album worth 10 times that. The best deal I've ever found. And not only in terms of money, she inquired as I walked live and stepped back onto the street. "I know a spot. How is your car?" The cafe she selected, which was 6 blocks away, was tiny and disorganized, with modern art mingled with antique furniture, stated. I'm stirring sugar into her, claiming a corner table as the record between us, similar to a peace pact. "Will we talk about Tuesday night? Cappuccino, or will we continue to act as like it never happened?" My stomach turned over, looking for more of your fakery, which I'm slowly figuring out isn't particularly genuine. I was married to a man 2 months ago, and now I'm just pointing hopelessly. "And you're what?" "Attracted to my female business colleague. But it's complicated." "Why must it be complicated?" "Because I've never felt this way about a man or woman, and I'm not sure what I'm doing because Genevieve's words escaped my lips before I could stop them. They were clever, beautiful, and most likely much beyond my capabilities. Her face softened, and she touched my wrist. "Sadie," across the table, "I can say with certainty that I have been drawn to you since the first time I entered your escape room because of the manner I kept returning with hope as you described the puzzles and the emotion in your voice when discussing the creative process. You would recognize me as more than just a client. You were pitifully flirting with me for weeks. I'm in awe of you. I didn't seek for signals because I was married, but now I noticed her. Bright blue eyes, with a little smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Across the tiny table, illuminated by she was the most stunning woman I had ever seen, with her hair gleaming like polished wood from the window, and she showed curiosity, and I confess that I'm afraid now. But I don't want to quit that afternoon. I was pleasantly delighted by Genevieve's cozy and organized flat when she offered me to listen to our common record. Books arranged well, mystery novel covers covering whole walls. An antique record player occupied one area, encircled by meticulously arranged milk crates of vinyl. I inquired about her collection's genre and whether it was chronological or alphabetical. Chronological, unless it's Miles Davis, who, of course, deserves its own area. With great care, it was taken somewhat blue from its sleeve and placed on the turntable as if in a sacred rite. My dad used to remark, the first notes of So What filled the room, and I closed my eyes to let the music wash over me. The CD was flawless. I whispered each note precisely where it should have been. What a clever man. Did he perform tenor sax on the weekends at New Orleans jazz clubs prior to me? After they got married, his birth mother forced him to stop, just like Randy forced you to stop dreaming. When I opened my eyes, I saw her. She tapped the seat next to her while she watched me from the couch or something, and then came here to sit next to Genevieve. Felt both natural and dangerous at the same time, and the music made closeness and conversation flow more easily than before. During our marriage, she shared with me her memories of weekend excursions to Memphis to listen to blues music while growing up in Mississippi. I discovered that your narratives are particularly effective because you are a musician and acquire story structure from song lyrics. Every good mystery has a song set up to help you comprehend the emotional progression, resolution of issues. But what about us? What type of music are we still playing? During our conversation, the CD was playing, and as the afternoon sun moved across her living room floor, blue and green began to move closer to me on the couch. Sadie, may I ask you a personal question? Another question? Have you ever had a romantic relationship with a lady before? You know I haven't, but I want to be clear about what this is. Heat crept up my neck. Her directness surprised me because I'm not interested in being someone's experiment or curiosity. I believe you're recently divorced and rethinking every aspect of your life. Is that what you think I'm doing? Guard, that's normal. But I want to know if your desire for me is sincere or only a protest against your marriage. I gave the question careful thought, and I found that my desire to her was unlike anything I had ever had with Randy or former boyfriends were more natural and intense, like coming home to me. Sincerely, I remarked in a low voice that whatever is going on between us isn't about Randy or she leaned closer, and this time there was no evidence that it was about you. Darkness to conceal behind light kissed her face as she traced my jawline with her fingertip and touched my cheek. I'm going to, she replied. I'll kiss you again, and this time there won't be any electrical issues to interrupt us. Her lips found mine with the same gentleness as before, but I confidently kissed her back now. Her mouth was warm and soft, with a coffee-like flavor. The thought of her touching me with her tongue sent a shockwave through my body. Oh, I muttered as we drew apart, breathing heavily. Good O or terrible O? Very good. Oh, she grinned and drew me in closer, her hands entwining in my hair, while mine traced the contour of her waist. Each touch was like discovering a new language. Although I had always known, I had never said, bedroom. She pressed her lips to mine. My heart ached so much that I was certain she could sense it. Are you? I asked myself. Roughly 15 years of planned closeness and consistent behaviors about Randy. The woman who sat next to me could relate to my dreams, made me laugh, and gave me a fascinating look. Her bedroom was just as warm as the rest of the apartment, which was inconvenient. She lighted candles while gently lighting books on every surface and creating the same cozy mess that immediately put me at rest. I became anxious as I stood close to the window, and she replied, "We can stop at any time." I leaned back against her as her arms wrapped my waist without applying any pressure. She turned me slowly, her hands framing my face as she said, "I want this. I want you. Do you realize that no one has referred to me as lovely in years? Sadie, you're gorgeous." Randy's favorite words were attractive and presentable, and Genevieve used them as if they were scarcely words. This time, when she kissed me, her gentle uncertainty turned to desire, and we went to her bed together. Her touch was respectful, careful, and everything I touched vanished between whispered encouragement and caresses. She took the time to find out what made me gasp, what made me arch against her touch, and what prompted me to call her husband, her name in a manner that sounded like a prayer. And then we slept together, curled up. As Miles Davis performed in the next, I traced patterns on her shoulder in the room, amazed at how accurate this felt. My gut nodded as she whispered softly. Regrets. None of you, just one. What that we waited this long? I chuckled, and I felt a wave of relief. It's better late than never. And 3 weeks into our relationship, Randy unexpectedly showed up at my workshop. As Genevieve and I were finishing up the Victorian mansion area, he entered the room as though he owned it, wearing an expensive suit, a patronizing demeanor, and a manner of, we need to discuss. Randy, he was looking about my space as if I had disappointed him. This is Genevieve, my business partner. She extended herself with ease. Randy ignored the gesture, concentrating only on me. It was a pleasure to meet you. That's intriguing. Business buddy, as I've been hearing some fascinating tales about your new living conditions, the stories that Saudi people in tiny towns tell me made my blood freeze. When he pointed dismissively at Genevieve living with him, he said, they say you're involved with this woman romantically. You're not denying the rest. Genevieve, even though we don't live together, moved closer to me in a subdued gesture of support, which Randy saw right away and which is why our marriage failed. He added, you're reuniting with the first person who paid attention to you, despite your incapacity to make sensible decisions. Genevieve said, that's enough. You should go. I wasn't speaking to. This is between my ex-wife and you. Rye's voice carried the courtroom authority that had frightened the opposing counsel. Me? Really? I haven't found my voice. My personal life is disconnected from Randy. Is no longer your issue. Rather, it has to do with how it impacts our settlement agreement. Moral turpitude. Provision. Saadi looked them up. His stomach fell when his lawyer insisted on using rhetoric about upholding morals during the divorce proceedings. Rules supposedly to safeguard any alimony contracts I could sign in the future. You can't be serious if you're rushing to finish everything without attentively reading. Considering your mental health, homosexual relationships may warrant a review of the asset division. Describe your emotional instability and mental state during the divorce proceedings, making illogical business judgments. And the sexual confusion confirms that the pattern is still present. I feel like I'm getting angry. After 15 years of marriage, Steam Pressure still viewed me as a broken device. He could either fix it or throw it away. I advised him to carefully consider his options. I told Randy to get out and straighten his tie because this little lesbian experiment could cost you all you've worked so hard to achieve. I'll give you time to change your mind if you've been acting arrogantly, but if you want to keep the. After he departed, the workshop was silent like a deadly gas. Genevieve grabbed for my hand, but I pulled away, saying that I should have been more cautious. You have every right to live your life as you truly are, even if it means paying for it. Moral turpitude clauses, which he is bluffing about, haven't been enforced for. I began pacing between decades, because you have no idea how Randy will make this costly, public, and humiliating. The prop tables made me think of the worst-case scenarios and the legal bills I couldn't pay, as well as the gossip in the community. Because I fell in love with my business partner, my reputation suffered and all I had worked so hard to build was ruined. Perhaps we might slow down, I urged, avoiding eye contact, and keep our relationship private until the dust settles. You mean to return, to act as though we are merely temporary co-workers. How? I was momentarily unable to respond as I was unaware that Rye's threats were genuine, substantial. He had connections and finances that I did not, and a drawn-out court case could ruin me even if I ultimately prevailed. This is unfair to you, I argued. You need someone who can. I have a voice in what I deserve. Of course, but don't I get to be honest about loving you, regardless of the difficulties she undoubtedly caused? I chose us. I was a divorced lady with a failing business 3 weeks prior, and suddenly I had a partner who recognized my aspirations and a stunning woman who seemed to love me in spite of Rye's threats. Who my sister Daisy named this. I mentioned changing the topic this morning. She wants to come next week. How anxious are you about that? She's the sole family member who still talks to me after I left. What does she know about us? Nothing yet. But Daisy is observant. After 5 minutes of watching us together, Genevieve stepped closer to test whether I would pull away once again, but she grasped my hands. Perhaps having family support isn't such a horrible thing. Or perhaps there's only one way for her to know that night. Genevieve, and she'll act like Randy did, got a call from a New York publisher who wanted to publish her mystery novel, which was an opportunity she had been pursuing for years, but the date seemed inconvenient. They would like to meet on Friday, told me about an amazing possible book deal after hanging up. They expressly stated that they wanted to meet the business partner who motivates me, So why don't you sound excited? Tell them I'm romantically involved because they think our recent collaborative narrative would make excellent marketing collateral. Engaged with my inspiration, which isn't really traditional publishing area, this presents another challenge and justifies. Conceal what we discovered together. Attend the meeting, and I'll let you know what they have to offer. Work the rest out later. But as I watched her leave for New York, I pondered whether Rye's warnings would ever materialize, loomed like storm clouds over us, and now publisher demands put further strain on an already precarious situation. Everything we created together, including our business alliance, love affair, and future plans, suddenly, picturing felt risky, like a puzzle with too many pieces missing. After returning from New York with a book deal and an apparently unattainable ambition, they want a series, Genevieve remarked, laying publisher papers on my kitchen table, 6 mystery novels with an escape room designer in them, who uses our cooperation to solve crimes. The marketing is really, department believes that our collaboration is ideal for the current market, where 2 accomplished women are creating something creatively together. I looked over the contents of the contract with increasing astonishment. It was a 6-figure advanced promotional tour. What did you tell them about us? I asked about possible rights for television adaptations of everything Genevieve had dreamed about. The reality that we are business partners who have created a groundbreaking interactive entertainment product. Not the complete truth yet, but Sadi, this has the potential to transform everything in terms of financial freedom if we have actual funds behind us. Then Rye's threats mean nothing to any of us. She was correct about publishing success, would address several issues at once, but first we had to demonstrate that our idea was effective beyond my limited. I suggested using this community center's basement space for our largest room yet, which is where the Victorian mansion meets the workshop. The size of 200 square feet, combining psychological horror and detective thriller, chambers with intricate plots that cover 3 related tales through Genevieve's eyes, the detective's inquiry, the family's disappearance, and the contemporary. Players move precisely between 3 time periods and 1 location during discovery. In order to solve historical puzzles that influence contemporary solutions, we spent the next week creating our most ambitious project to date. Genevieve created complex tales that wow, and I handled technological mechanics. Together, over many years, the tragic secrets of the Victorian family impacted the detective's research. Way contemporary gamers encountered both historical accounts while putting in 18 hours a day. We converted the basement into a combination of secret compartments, audio equipment, and vintage furniture creates a wonderful atmosphere. Provided voices from earlier lighting systems that were changed to reflect time period changes. Each detail serviced several. Testing a pressure-sensitive floor panel that produced ancestral voices is crazy. I said, referring to narrative functions. People will go crazy, whether it's a good or bad crazy revolution. We decided to test the entire experience ourselves on a crazy Friday night. And the basement was deserted, save for the 3 of us. Floors of connected puzzles awaiting the test of our acquired abilities ready, Genevieve inquired, starting the timer sequence that said, "Let's solve some murders." The first room took us back to 1887. At the last dinner party hosted by the Victorian family, we collaborated to solve clues regarding tainted wine and covert activities. Collaboration was smooth after months of working together when we activated the lighting change and modernization transition process. I gasped when I saw the elements of a criminal scene superimposed over historical props. Because he is unaware of the family secrets, the investigator sees the same evidence but interprets it differently. Found that the second phase needed us to think like investigators from the 1940s using when period-appropriate reasoning is combined with information from the Victorian timeframe. Everything changed once more to the present, where we acted as archaeologists unearthing both earlier 3 hours after our investigations. We both figured out the last problem and made our way to the loading dock in the basement. We're drenched, thrilled, and a little intoxicated by their artistic triumph that, since Genevieve began, amazing people have been traveling all across the nation. When the publisher learns about this incident, they will be furious. She drew me in throughout the void. Loading area. We're still giddy with excitement and pride since we worked together to create something. When she kissed him, they were partners in crime and everything. 3 months prior, I had been stuck in a failed marriage. But this time, it felt like a celebration and a promise mixed. I was operating a failing company by myself until I found a creative partner who motivated us both, and a woman who noticed my dreams as clearly as I did carried me home. And I said, "Your place," against her lips, or yours. I'd like to wake up in your bed. We had love at her flat. Months of mounting stress were finally released with urgent eagerness. and she touched me as if she were memorization, each reply. And I became engrossed in feelings I had never had with another person. Later, we wrapped up while I sketched lines on her naked shoulder as Jazz played quietly on her record player, trying to understand how the publishing contract is just the beginning, she whispered, because my life had completely changed. See what we've produced. Escape room designers will be pleading with us to license our storytelling methods globally. Expansion. Why not interactive mystery entertainment in London, Paris, Tokyo? You're thinking big about global markets. And I'm thinking large because we're building something important as art that people engage with rather than merely view. Could envision our future unfolding like a map with prosperous businesses, publications, and financial independence that would render rise warnings moot. But beyond career achievement, I witnessed unimaginable levels of personal bliss. Genevieve M., I love you. She looked me in the eye and said, I love you too more than I thought I could love anyone. Even if I'm still discovering who I am, particularly as a result of which we are both evolving into our current selves, I felt bits of myself clicking as I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing calm down into sleep. Everything I had lost throughout my divorce had led me to everything I had acquired, fitting together like a well-made piece. Since we would be meeting her tomorrow, we would have to deal with rise threats, publisher meetings, and all of the other issues, creating something new. But tonight, while our shared record played and I was held in Genevieve's arms, I felt totally. 6 months later, our grand opening attracted throngs that gathered around me for the first time in years. The Mobile Register published a special article about our groundbreaking escape room experience for 3 city blocks. Customers with excited smiles emerged from the Victorian mansion to be interviewed by local news teams. And shock. Social media erupted with comments referring to our installation as I told Genevieve, who was watching, that this is crazy for the future of interactive entertainment. Another group vanished into the basement entrance. As of this morning, we had a solid 3-month and 4-month reservation. She looked amazing in her black dress, and the tourism board wants to include us in their national advertising campaign. 6 months prior, she had worked as a freelance writer solving riddles and was dazzling and self-assured when she facilitated media interviews. Mrs. Evans, a reporter, was co-owner of the most inventive entertainment company in the Southeast for research. Contacted with microphone ready. Could you describe your partnership with Miss Morgan? Genevieve adds a story, proficiency that turns straightforward puzzle solving into moving narratives. Our clients are not merely escape room visitors. They go through such dramatic situations, and you two seem really close to me. I looked at Genevieve, who gave us a supportive nod, and we talked about the planned event and jointly chose how public we wanted to be. Building this together with Genevieve, my business and love partner, has been the most fulfilling experience of my life. The reporter's brows raised a little, but her face stayed polished and successful in the current day. Narrative on several levels. Genevieve found me just as the evening was coming to an end. The most of the guests had left after the workshop area was cleaned up, but music continued to play from the upstairs reception. How do you feel? She asked, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind like we... During interviews, the publisher called and said they just changed everything. We did wish to expedite the book series in light of tonight's reaction. Additionally, Rye's attorney canceled the lawsuit this afternoon, indicating that moral turpitude clauses are not applicable when the defendant becomes a well-known local entrepreneur who appears in travel advertisements. And I chuckled. I'm relieved that we're free. She danced with me here, right here, totally free, and twirled me around to face her eyes, which were full of success and champagne. I could hear party music coming from upstairs as people talked and laughed in the area where we fell in love. Our visitors, but in the workshop with the designs and props that symbolized months of effort together. We enjoyed a brief moment of seclusion as Genevieve's hand touched mine, and her other arm wrapped around my waist. I have something for you, she said, as we both smiled gently to music, like teenagers dancing for the first time, reaching into her jacket pocket. Genevieve responded, no, we decided there would be no gifts until she withdrew until we were certain the business would be successful. The original type of blue album from the vintage store came in a tiny, flat, rectangular, wrapped container, expertly reframed with our receipt from the day we agreed to share custody. She whispered quietly, I love it. I love you, and I will always love you. As we had vowed, I tasted our future book agreements and business growth when she gave me a slow, sweet, and shameless kiss, and rising together each morning, overcoming obstacles as a couple, and sharing in each other's successes. My sister Daisy entered with a champagne glass in her hand as the door to the workshop opened. I apologize. To cut her off, but she paused in the middle to take in the view. Oh well, this clarifies a lot of why Genevieve and I split up so quickly. Daisy was self-conscious when she met Genevieve. Daisy, my sister and well-known business partner, had a warm, sincere grin. Can understand why my sister has been so joyful lately. It's good to finally meet you, Genevieve said, and for the record, Daisy held out her glass to us both at around the damn time Sadie discovered. In the studio where it all began, the three of us shared a toast with someone who truly values her. The downtown area of Mobile was bustling with Friday night activity outside. And upstairs, our fantastic launch party went on. Time seemed to be suspended here, encircled by the mysteries we had made and the love we had found. Without us, I said, what happens next? And Genevieve responded, pulling me. Together, we solve puzzles one at a time and eventually construct an empire. As we cleared away the remaining wedding trash that evening, I couldn't help but think about Detective Morrison, the fictitious figure whose stage disappearance had united us. Like him, I had fled a life that never fit right. In contrast to him, I hadn't had to vanish to discover who I was. All I had to do was figure out the correct mystery, the mystery of who I truly was, who I wanted to love, and what kind of live make me genuinely pleased, because all the solutions had been waiting in a workshop in the basement with a bright woman who noticed puzzles in the same manner that I did, but ours wasn't traditional as far as stories concerned. Ours, and it was genuine, and it was only getting started.